Mr. Keating.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to testify on the budget today. You know, my constituents in the South Shore, Cape and Islands, and Massachusetts have very strong opinions on how their taxpayer money should be spent, and what I want to do is just communicate some of those views to you. We sent out to several thousands of people solicitations, and we had tremendous response from those people. And let me just pick more specific parts of that to communicate what they feel, because the responses I got, frankly, were overwhelming, and the people wanted me to communicate their specific ones in today's testimony. Most of my constituents wanted the budget to reflect their top priority, and amazingly and not surprisingly, however, that is job creation. As the country emerges from the worst economic disaster since the Depression, the people of Massachusetts want more action, more priority on jobs. They want tax credits to hire veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan who have some of the highest unemployment rates in the country, incentives for businesses to keep jobs right here in America rather than offshore, a renewed focus on green jobs because these are the jobs of the future, and America must be prepared to lead the world in this important sector. Many of the constituents understand that the key to job growth is effective education. Cutting education priorities is the wrong move at the wrong time. The federal government has an obligation, a sacred responsibility, to prepare our children for a competitive global economy and the challenges of the 21st century. Education is the great equalizer. So cutting the Workforce Investment Act, job training initiatives, or cutting Pell Grants for needy college students threatens job and economic growth and Americans' overall competitiveness. Education has allowed Massachusetts to become the hub of technology and innovation. Americans and people all over the globe know that they'll encounter world-class ideas, get world-class care at Massachusetts institutions, and we're proud of the contributions that we can share with the rest of the country. But these very initiatives are at risk without proper funding. And let's be clear, the federal government should be funding these initiatives. They save American lives, and most importantly, they create Americans' jobs when we need it the most. We also need to consider those who've done this before us, like our seniors and our veterans who have made this country what it is. I'm particularly concerned that the budget that's being proposed by the majority will target benefits that seniors in my district depend on, like Social Security and Medicare. For the majority of retirees, Social Security provides more than half of their annual income. Reducing benefits would not reduce the deficit, but would greatly harm our seniors. In my district, more than any in Massachusetts, I represent the highest number of our seniors and elder citizens. An overwhelming majority of my constituents do not want this Congress to cut federal initiatives that serve them, their neighbors, and their family, or our most vulnerable populations. I leave you with the story of Shira Whaley of Scituate, Massachusetts, one of my constituents, to remind you that through targeted cuts, we should be very careful and surgical about how we approach these things. This is a personal story. I admired her for sharing this with us, and it's important to realize this is just not issues. These are faces. These are people, and it's behind every dollar we spend. Ms. Whaley contacted my office because of the threat of budget cuts to cancer research. You see, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Whaley chose to live in Massachusetts precisely because of the access of cutting-edge research that occurs in that state. She's a survivor of advanced ovarian cancer, and she's participated in clinical trials that she credits with her life nearly 5 years after the diagnosis. There's still much work to be doing in cancer detection, treatment, and prevention at the National Cancer Institute, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the Department of Defense Ovarian Cancer Research Project. Ms. Whaley wrote to me that the cancer that she suffered through is still a short-term death sentence for many today. As a new congressman, I take these budget negotiations seriously, knowing that my constituents are relying on me to share with Congress their personal stories and to make sure that they be heard over the political rhetoric that often consumes us. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to working with you and your colleagues in a bipartisan manner to ensure that the American people's priorities are reflected in this budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Keating. Ms. Bass, I'll defer to you if you'd like to make a comment.
Yes, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Keating. I did have a question. You described several areas that you didn't feel should be cut, and I believe you had some proposals that you put on the floor a few weeks ago, and so perhaps you could tell us, if we don't cut those areas, how could we afford to close the deficit?
Well, thank you very much, and it's great to see you here as a fellow freshman participating so fully. We do have to look at those areas. We have to do it in a way. One area I do believe divides America and will not save money is raising the retirement age of Social Security. That does not mean that we have to look at other alternatives. Maybe indexing above the 106,000 should be explored if necessary, in the areas that on the floor I took action on, certainly two jump out, I think, that could have savings without affecting the quality of life of the people that I serve. That was an opportunity to save $43.6 billion in oil subsidies. Now, I've done my research and talked to the think tanks that are involved, nonpartisan think tanks, and asked them where these monies go. And the answer was to shareholders. Now, that's great if you're a shareholder of an oil company, but that does not serve any need. And that's a significant amount of money that could be cut. I also think in the defense budget, looking at the monies we're expending right now, and there was an amendment offered, I believe, by Mr. Paulus about cutting some of our expenditures in Europe, in areas where the vestiges of the Cold War still remain, and we're still out of date in funding needs that are no longer needs, not even for this country or even the countries involved. And those are a couple of examples. But there are areas approached surgically where we can do things. But the one thing that we shouldn't do is just look at what I think is an artificial number of $100 billion. Look further about what's done. I am concerned and have shared on the floor as well the fact that people like Mark Zandi from Moody's, who was an advisor for Senator McCain, has said that moving ahead with those type of cuts right now would cost us 700,000 lost jobs by 2012. And I'm concerned of the effect of those lost jobs. Now, Massachusetts is doing slightly better than the rest of the country. 97% of our citizens have health insurance. We were the first state to statistically come out of the recession. We're fifth right now in creating new jobs. But we're still doing that with much too high an unemployment rate and people suffering from the effects of not having a job. So that remained my priority, and it will remain my priority, getting people back to work. That is the best way to address all of our country's problems.
Thank you very much. Maybe California could borrow some money from Massachusetts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keating.
Bye.
Mr. Keating, very briefly, thank you for your testimony. Thank you, by the way, for taking the time to actually come up with specific proposals. We're going to need as many of those as we can get in the coming days. I will reference the report you mentioned, however, regarding the 700,000 jobs that are lost. I've seen a similar report, I think, from Goldman Sachs that said we would cut 2% off of the GDP. If you run the math at that multiplier level, then the stimulus bill should have created 9 million jobs and added 26% to GDP. So I think the gild is off the lily when it comes to the multiplier effect of government spending. But to your larger point, all of these cuts have faces attached to them. There's no question. Every single person in this Congress has folks in their constituency who will be affected by them. I just hope we don't lose the sight of the other faces, which are the folks who are paying the debt. I have 3 11-year-olds who are faced with a crushing debt in their future and a dramatically lower standard of living. So I know that we share some of the same goals. I think we probably have different ideas on how to get there, but I do appreciate your testimony today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and if I may.
Certainly.
If we are making cuts, I do want to see that applied to the deficit, and I think there's a real question that the cuts will not translate into deficit reduction. So that's something we can discuss together and work towards, because I agree with you, the deficit reduction is important, and I also believe, seeing what's happening in my state, that delicate balance of maintaining and creating new jobs, while at the same time creating a framework to deal with that deficit remains all of us here in Congress. That remains our #1 priority.
Thank you, Mr. Keating.
Thank you.